All right, why don't we get started? It's 5:04. I don't see Savannah here. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. This is being recorded. Like I said, it'll be on Facebook, and it's also going to be, I'm going to try to do my best to try to do double duties here. And if anyone has any questions on Facebook, guys, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I'll try my best to get those questions asked. So just quick introduction, in case I haven't met you guys, my name is Alex Sabio, married father of four, live here in Southern California. Started my short-term rental journey in August of 2020, and it's been absolutely phenomenal. I love the guest experience. I love the hospitality aspect of it. I've been scaling our business up, and actually today, extremely good news. We got a hotel under contract, and the appraisal came in way above what we got it under contract. So we're really excited about that. But when I first started my short-term rental journey, I started listening to all of these different podcasts, reaching out to different people. And, Zeona was somebody I listened to on Bigger Pockets. I forget what episodes, 276 or something like that. And actually, she inspired me, and she came off so genuine. And then I bought her book, 30-Day Stay Through Bigger Pockets, and been listening to that. So really excited to have her on. So Zeona, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. That's so sweet. I love hearing all these people that are successful after. And I'm just like, oh man, if I had even one little drop of inspiration in their bucket, that just makes me super proud.
So Zeona, why don't you give people a little bit of an intro of who you are?
Yeah, so I started in short-term rentals back in 2012, and I've kind of done most types of short-term rentals. I started with arbitrage, then moved into owning my own properties, then co-hosted, and I co-hosted over 60 units in 5 countries. Now I only manage my own properties. And then I got into midterm rentals around COVID time. And then I wrote a book on midterm rentals with Sarah Weaver for Bigger Pockets. So it's been a long journey, but happy to be here. Happy to help people get started.
That's interesting because you say that you got kind of shifted from short-term rentals to midterms. And I guess the market I'm in, it kind of boomed, right? And I know a lot of people, they got into the vacation rental market and their numbers got kind of inflated, right? Because of COVID. So how exactly did you land on medium-term rentals? Like, what was the driving force there?
Yeah, so right around COVID. So I remember actually being on a podcast like March 8th, I think. And then the very next day, everything blew up. But on that podcast, my friend was like, well, what do you think about all this COVID stuff? Do you think it's going to be that big of a deal? And I was like, yeah, I think the news just kind of like blows it up. No big deal. I had seen maybe 1 or 2 cancellations, but it seemed like we were going into a great season, right? It's like March is just the beginning and then you roll into it. And so we had bookings into May. Well, the very next day, everything was shut down, quarantine, and bookings just completely fell off the calendar. And it was the first time back then, it was like 8 years in that I had built this whole business. It was what I lived off of. And I was like, whoa, is this going to go away? Like, is this over for me? And that was really that shook me to my core. Yeah.
Right. Really scary. Right. I remember Airbnb was changing their policies. They weren't honoring guest policies or whatever, or
cancellation
homeowners
policies.
Cancellation policies, that everyone was upset at them at that time. What cities were your rentals in?
Yeah, back then, I mean, Boulder and Colorado Springs, St. Louis. Hard to say. I can't remember because I'm always selling and buying new properties, but I had just a bunch of properties in different markets and it didn't really matter. They all kind of closed down, but it was temporary. And I think that the thing about being an investor is being able to be creative. And so I put on my investor cap and I was like, okay, I'm not just going to have these properties sit vacant. And I think in COVID, a lot of people stopped doing short-term rental, maybe they just fully shut down and they were like, well, I guess we're just going to go long-term. And for me, I started to see bookings coming in that were a little bit longer, maybe 2 weeks for quarantine, people looking for larger homes so that they could work from home and have their kids at home. So I was trying to get really creative. And that's when I started realizing that you can still do month-to-month furnished rentals, and I actually liked them better. So that's kind of what got me started. And now there's so much to learn about the space. It's so new and it's got a lot of upside. So I'm just really excited to be breaking into this and to helping a lot of people get into it too.
And you talk about being new, because I think what happened is so many, and a lot of people in my group, they're all like short-term rental operators, and they always ask me, did I get in too late? To be honest, like some markets you might have gotten into late.
Yeah,
And but the cool thing about midterm rentals is I think it's early in the game. I mean, that's
it
my
is.
assessment with it. Like if this were a baseball game, we're probably third inning, fourth inning, right? Like when I look at different listings out there, a lot of the listings are, they don't even have like professional photos or any of that, right? So
Yeah,
what do you think? You think we're still early in the game here, or do you
I
think
really
it's still
do.
advisable to like for people to start their own midterm rental business?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always think it's based on your goals, right? So like I was just talking to some people earlier today because I do some like one-on-one consulting. And for somebody who works full time, if you're wanting something that's like a set it and forget it, then you probably should be in long-term rentals or in syndications like yours. You've got one coming up where
Right,
people can still get really good tax deductions, but then they don't have to do much, right? You just like make the money in your job and then go put it somewhere.
right,
Midterm
right,
rentals
right,
is
right.
still hospitality, right? So you can't get into it thinking, oh, cool, I'm just going to automate everything. And it's still early enough that if people remember the days of short-term rentals, like before 2017, like there were no automations. You didn't have like the cute pricing software and like AirDNA
Right.
and all these kinds of things that were helping you do everything automatically. Like you had to do it yourself. And that was fine.
Right.
You know, we learned, and then the software is caught up. And I think that will happen for midterm rentals, but we're not quite there yet. So it's a little more hands-on, high touch. You might have to pick up the phone. So, it's not going to be for everybody, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity in it if you're willing to do a little bit of extra work.
That's another thing I was going to ask. I mean, some of the software that my groups used to, like we all use Price Labs and we all use um, different property management software systems. Like I use Guestly for
Yeah.
Host, which used to
Auto
be Work Order.
messaging, all that
Right,
stuff.
right. So does that still apply with midterm rentals? Like, I mean, obviously, if they book to Airbnb, they're still going to get all those same automated messages, right?
Yeah, so it depends on where you're listing. If you're listing on Airbnb, you definitely want to be using pricing software still because they're seasonal, just like short-term rentals are. And then auto messaging, like we use Hospitable, but they do it through a lot of different apps. Auto messaging is still very valid. So you can plug in
Mhm.
someone's email address as their reservation. It doesn't have to be an Airbnb reservation, and they'll
Mhm.
get all those pre-saved messages, but to their email. So there's
Right,
definitely
right.
ways to still utilize the automations. There's just not, it's not like when you go on Airbnb, they go to book and then a lease pops up and they autofill it. Like that's not there yet, but it
Mhm.
should be. And it will be.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what one of my friends. I'm so excited for her, Rajni. If you're listening, I told you to join because she was asking me about like what she should do her about her rental, whether she should do short-term rental. I said you can't do it in those cities, But the thing is, you're right next to a hospital, and she just got this really cool. I don't want to give away how much she made, but 3-month rental for a nurse, and it's way more than what she would have expected for just a regular month to month that she was doing. So I love hearing
Yeah.
those success stories.
Well, it's not as
Zena
fun
is
if you don't actually talk about the numbers, bro. You got to give people
what
something to chew
I
on.
know. Okay, so it was like third, and I think it was on the low end, and that's what I told her. I said because she got like a $13,000 booking for 3 months, right? And the thing
Wow.
is,
That's a lot.
normally it's probably renting for like $3,000 a month for as a long term rental, right? And
Yeah.
I think she still underpriced it, right? So,
Awesome.
are there any other I like? There's a lot of like our group is medical professionals, and we always talk about the travel nurse, right?
Yeah.
Are there any other groups that you see that we can target to with the midterm rental stays?
Absolutely. So there's kind of like a split in the midterm rental space. There's sort of the basic start where a lot of our book focused on this, where it's travel nurses, digital nomads, business travelers. A lot of those people are booking through Furnish Finder and Airbnb. And it's easy, but they don't pay as much. Right. So
Mm,
nurses, a lot of you guys probably have been travel nurses or worked with travel nurses. They're looking for a deal, right? Like they get a
mhm.
stipend and they want to try to keep as much of that as they can, which understandably. But
You're
when
putting it
you
too nice. They're cheap, Ziona. They're cheap. They want to keep their money,
I don't
okay?
know. I mean, it all depends. But there is like another tier of people that maybe are doctors or something that get a higher
Yes.
pay grade. And so they're not necessarily looking for a deal. They might be traveling with their whole family, in which case they're happy to have their agency or their recruiter place them, and that company will pay a lot more. Right. So if you go this deeper level, if you're working with recruiters, corporate relocation, construction companies, insurance, like displaced people that have had like a flood or fire, those companies pay so much more because you're in a space of business to business rather than working directly with a person and their budget. Right.
Yeah, I hear those stories. We had Rachel Gainsborough on, and she was talking about how she went with insurance companies, and I said, like, these numbers are mind blowing. Like, what?
Crazy.
And the thing, and the thing is, when I look at it, they're making more money than me as a short-term rental operator, right? And I'm working my butt off here, right? So can you talk a little bit about the amount of work? Is it like exponentially less work? Like you mentioned that you do have to, like, the pricing software is there, but maybe you might have to call them or send them the lease over. I mean, how much less work is it? And maybe that appeals to, like, I have a lot of doctors here that just don't want to deal with any of this crap, right? Because guests sometimes make you cry and drive you nuts, right? But maybe that's the appeal to, right? Like they try to, like, get free stays or tell you your place is dirty when it really isn't. But I mean, that's the appeal of midterm stays, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting, like with an Airbnb, like a short-term rental. So I shouldn't just say Airbnb because we both use that. But a short-term rental, you can have a thing where it's like a booking comes in, they book automatically, your cleaner is automatically notified, they check in, they don't talk to you, like, it can completely be automated. So midterm, even though people come for 3 months, they might extend for another 3-month term, and then you've got them there for 6 months, and they're really not asking a lot of questions. At the beginning, you might have had to call them and get a little bit of info, figure out why they're there, maybe talk to their past landlord, write a lease. Like some of that stuff is not too complicated, but it might just take a little bit of extra time. But then after that, you've got somebody for 3 or 6 months, right? So it's a little bit of more work on the front end, but I find that it's just a lot of peace of mind, and you don't have emergencies. And that's the thing that like kills me about short-term rentals is like trash is an emergency, noise is an emergency, smoking is an emergency, like everything can be a nightmare. Not to like say that you should do it, but it can be stressful. Especially if you're out of state.
And when you say emergency, like a friend of mine said this, that short-term rentals can be part-time, but it is all the time. And the thing is, yes, you're probably working like 2-3 hours a week or something like that because we have all these automation software, but those 2-3 hours might come at 4 a.m.
Yeah,
when,
it's
like,
dinner time, it's
like
Friday, like it's always the worst freaking time.
Yeah. And the thing that gets me, it's always the smoke detectors that seem to chirp at 2 a.m. And I'm like, I don't have anyone to come out that's right. So, I mean, not to say that's not going to happen with midterm rentals, but for some reason, it seems to follow me there with short-term rentals. Even brand new batteries, they still do it.
So you got to get those ones that are wired in, bro. When they're wired in, they don't have batteries.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, it's okay. It's just a little hot tip for you.
Right. You touched on this a little bit because I get this question all the time with midterm rentals, and I'm not an expert at all. I don't have any midterm rental experience, but I know a lot of operators out there. You talked about the lease agreement. How are you handling that? Do you have like a pre-written one, and do they actually have to physically sign it, or do you just have them like do a dot loop? How do you work that out?
Yeah, so that's kind of really easy. So if somebody's on a site like Bigger Pockets, you can get leases there. If you use something like Avail, we use Avail to collect our money. They do like auto payments. They have a lease for every state. And so you can basically just say, we're in Colorado, you just pull up the Colorado lease and then you just fill in the blanks. And so it's pretty standard and easy. So I think a lot of times people get worried about certain things, like in short-term rentals, it's all like, oh my God, do I need an LLC before I do anything? It's like, don't worry so much about the legal stuff. A lease, it's not like, oh, I had the wrong wording or I had one sentence that's off. If you have to use that lease in court, you already lost. Basically, a lease is just holding it in place, hoping that if you need to reference something later, we agreed on this price, this deposit, this dog fee, whatever. That's what a lease is really for.
Right. And I think that fear comes like I live here in Southern California, and there's so many
Yeah.
of these horror stories of squatters or tenants not
Yeah.
wanting to move, and there's tenants' rights. I mean, have you had to deal with any of that with midterm rentals?
Nope, not once. Yeah, the thing with midterm
Yeah.
rentals is that people usually have another place to go. So if
Mhm.
people here have been travel nurses before, they're booking their assignments ahead of time, right? So they're in St.
Right.
Louis and then they're going to Hawaii or whatever. They've got an out. They're already going. They're down the road, So I'm not so worried about them just trying to stay forever because most of these people are professionals. Maybe they're working with a certain company that we're also associated with. So they're not trying to mess that up for themselves.
Right, right. And they've already been vetted with like what is it, a background check. So you kind of already know, right? So
Yes.
hopefully you're getting like a sweet tenant with that they're employed, right? Because it's a corporate travel or a travel nurse or whatever. So
Yeah.
little bit less fear with that. Is there a sweet spot that you look for when acquiring these like midterm rentals? Like I don't know, like I see like 5 bedrooms and I'm like, that's probably not gonna work. But I know some people absolutely killing it with 5 bedrooms because they're focusing in on the insurance stays, right?
Yeah. So it depends on who you want to serve. And a lot of times when people are just dipping a toe, they get a little bit nervous and they say, okay, well, maybe I just want to start with like a 1 bedroom condo or a little duplex where it's like 1 or 2 bedroom units. And those are great for traveling nurses and digital nomads and business travelers, but you're not going to get a family in a little condo, right? So if you're going to go gung ho, try to get into insurance stays or relocations and stuff like that, you definitely need a bigger home. And
Right.
it needs to be a single family home. They work really well, urban adjacent. So suburbs work well.
Mhm.
And then the thing is that there's more competition the smaller the home is. So
Mm.
REITs, like big syndications and hedge funds and stuff, have bought hundreds of units. And if they want to work directly with a construction company or relocation company, 1 and 2 bedrooms, they've got that corner, that market cornered, right? They can just get rental furniture and have it set up overnight. But these bigger homes, 4 or 5 bedrooms, you might have 1 or 2 in your market that's your competition. That's it.
Mhm. Right.
So you can cut out a little slice for yourself there.
Right. What about like, I mean, when I'm at my short-term rental, I'm like trying my best to deck these things out because you need to
Yeah.
stand out. Like I'm putting murals, trying to make it Instagrammable and all of that. I mean,
Yeah.
are you trying to do the same exact thing here? I mean, just to stand out? Like you obviously want it to look nice, but I mean, I'm just trying to get a gauge of how much more work I'm having to put into these.
Yeah, I don't think it's as much. I still think that anything that makes you stand out in pictures is going to be great. Like you still want beautiful decoration and or like, stylish decor. And then you want professional photos, absolutely. But do you need the fire pit and the game room and the hot tub? No,
Right,
not
right,
that.
right,
It's
right.
not there yet. And short-term rentals have gotten so competitive that yeah, you need,
Everyone needs a hot
the
tub.
neon sign and the mural
Yes.
and you've got to have like cool designed walls or wallpaper and all that stuff. I think some of those things help because it's just making pictures more clickable and more interesting, but I don't
Right.
think you need it. Yeah.
Are there any amenities that you feel we would need to put in our midterm rentals that just does it for you? Like when Zeona gets one, she's like, I'm having to put this in every single one, like this specific bed or this whatever it is. Do you have some like a formula
Yeah.
that you could share with us that would help some of our viewers?
I mean, I'm really into the Zenus green tea mattress. I mean, I think a lot of short-term rental people use that too. It's a mattress you can get
Hmm.
on Amazon. It's pretty cheap.
Yeah,
It feels
right.
great and people love it. So, I mean,
Hmm.
you have to think about people being there longer term. They want real sheets. Like you've got to have like cotton or natural fibers, none of this like polyester crap. When I see that in rentals, I get so, I don't know why, that this is like a pet peeve of mine. I'm like, oh, that feels so gross on your skin. Don't do that. So stuff like that. It's more about the comfort and it's about building out the kitchen more. So this might be a kitchen where you actually have a blender. Maybe you have a
Mm,
crock pot or something like that that would help somebody who's maybe short on time, but they still want to cook for themselves a little bit. I've heard
right,
different
right.
stories about nurses not really cooking at all. And I have seen some midterm rentals where it's really just a kitchenette and that's enough as long as it's got a microwave. But for these bigger homes where you're going to have insurance stays, it's a family. So you need to have
Right, right,
those comforts. Yeah.
right. If anyone else has any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat or raise your hand so that way you could interact with Zeona. Someone was asking for the link to
link
the
of the
mattress.
mattress.
Yeah.
I am looking that up right now, girl. Don't you worry.
I think it's a pretty common mattress. I've gotten it there on
Mhm.
Amazon myself, and I think it comes in a box, right? So that's like the easy
Yeah,
thing.
it's
Liz, go
awesome.
ahead and come on in here. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, Zeona.
Hi, nice to see you.
You as
Liz
well.
is my
So,
buddy.
yeah.
Mm,
So I have a
Fun.
question. We're currently kind of switching over. We have a couple spots in Columbus. They're 1 bed, 1 bath, and we're just going to make them. We actually have 2 midterms that kind of fell into place from Airbnb, but we're in the transition period with them. So I just got a message from a nurse yesterday who wants to stay in it, and I kind of just wanted to know the vetting process because I'm sure it's a nurse, and he basically just sent me a text. We talked on the phone. I got a lot of information from him, but do you like ask for their contracts, picture ID of their license, that kind of stuff? I just want to make sure that I'm not getting bamboozled or anything.
good
Yeah,
question.
so that is a good question. When I'm talking to them on the phone, I just kind of feel them out. It's interesting. You can do that a little bit through text, like in chats and short-term rentals. I did a lot of that before. If you get a weird vibe about somebody, I just say skip it. You're going to find somebody else. And sometimes people can be kind of aggressive, I've found. And so I usually try to stay away from those guests. I just don't want somebody that's going to be difficult down the road. And then when I'm
Okay.
talking to them, I'm getting an idea of when are they coming, what are they coming for? And so I have an idea of what their schedule is like. And then from there, if it seems like it's a good fit, I'm answering all their questions. I want to get a landlord recommendation, usually 2, because I want to call that landlord and I want to get a vibe of did they pay on time? Did they ever have complaints? Did anyone have to come to the house? Stuff like that. And then how they left it. So if you're talking to the current landlord, they're not going to know that yet. Right. So you'd want to talk to the one before that. And so if that goes well, I'm going to write the lease with them. And so I want an ID because I want that ID to match what's on the lease. And when it is a nurse, you can ask for a proof of employment, like a contract that they have. And then that you don't need to do a background check. If it's somebody who's not in a medical profession, you're finding those more and more on Furnished Finder. So it could be students or people moving or even just traveling around. I would want to background check them. And I've only been doing one adult, but I've heard from people that it's do every adult. I don't know, it kind of sounds like overkill. So you have to just decide what feels good for you. Maybe in California, but in Columbus, I don't know if you need that.
And then I had one last question about how much are you asking for up front? Are you taking a full month rent up front, all the security deposits, obviously, pet fees, cleaning fees? I kind of tried to skim the end of the book because I'm almost there, and so I didn't see it, but I'm sure it's in there. So I apologize if I'm not at that point yet.
No, you're fine.
Yeah,
your husband read the book. Why didn't he tell you?
I know, I should talk to him.
Okay. So the way that I do it is I imagine that nurses are hopping around, right? So if they have to give me a deposit, but their deposit is held up where they currently are, that's a lot of money out. So I try to keep the deposit pretty low. And so the deposit at most of my places is $1,000. And what I've been working towards is seeing if I can find, there's different companies. I haven't vetted this one yet. It's called Super Hog, but they have coverage that you can buy. And so then it's different. What I've been looking for are people that do kind of like an insurance policy where maybe instead of a deposit, somebody pays $50 and it covers them up to, $5,000, but then liability is higher or something like that. So I'm trying to figure out a way to make it easier because the deposit collecting is annoying for me and it's hard for them. Right. Because then I have to turn it back around. And so what I do with that is I collect the deposit at the time of signing. And then 3 days before they move in, I want their rent. So a lot of times people are booking a couple months ahead. And I don't want them to have to give me their rent and their deposit at the same time. It's just a lot.
What audio?
So that's how we do that. And then when they leave, I take the cleaning fee out of the deposit. We agree about that up front, but then that's less for them to have to pay as well. So if their deposit's $1,000 and then it's $150 for cleaning, I just take that out and give them $850 back. And it's been really rare that I've kept a deposit. It's, maybe it's $50 or something, but in general, people are pretty good. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Tuan, come on in here.
Hey, Zeona. Hey, Alex. What's up?
Hey.
How's it going, man? Good seeing you.
See you. I actually turned to midterm to Alex. Actually, we had a conversation that you like do the nurses. I'm like, okay, so I could have had an ADU. I mean, I'm in SoCal as well, and
Oh,
so
nice.
and then I'm like, okay, so a couple months later, your book came out. So I've been reading it. I think it's really detailed, and I really like, especially how you inserted your personal story into the telling what it is, right?
Thank you.
The section I was mostly interested in was travel nurses, and it's a question about stipend, because I know
Yeah.
like different state has different stipend. Like the average stipend for California is like 15 a week, $15 a week. So my question is, how do I determine? Do I determine the pricing based on how much they get for stipend? Or is it like a rule of thumb for like percentage stipend I should set my place? Because I try to look at the Furnish Finder, and yeah, that's all I'm getting really. I don't know any other site that help me to determine the price. But like a one bedroom is like 2,500, right? But
Yeah.
I'm looking at a different option. I'm trying to do the enemy method. I'm like, okay, this place doesn't have a pet place. So I created a patio with the doggy door. So I'm trying to stand out. In essence, I'm giving them more amenities, right? I just don't know how to set
Yeah.
the price. Where do I go from there?
Yeah, so your price is not going to be stagnant. So that's the first thing. But what I use is I use Furnish Finder for getting like the basics. So Furnish Finder is going to be my lower end price. And when I'm listing on Furnish Finder, I don't want to be the lowest, but I also don't want to be the highest. So I'm kind of looking around in there. And then the price that I put might be like the third highest or something like that, based on the fact that I have really good furniture and you have amenities like accepting pets and things like that that are really going to help you stand out. And then it's going to fluctuate. So you're either changing it on Furnish Finder, or when you email people, you're kind of putting the rate based on what's coming up for the next few months. And that's why it's good to be on Airbnb with your pricing software, because it can fluctuate as much as, like, I have a 1-bedroom condo in Boulder. It's generally around 2,500, but in the summer I can get up to $4,000 for the month. And so if you don't fluctuate your pricing, you're missing out on that.
So how do I determine? Is there like a high season for travelers to California? What would I find those info?
Probably. And so usually in the US, the higher season of travel is the summertime. And so it starts around March and it usually drops dead October 31st. Like it just slows down. So you kind of want to anticipate those times and get somebody locked in earlier and not be sitting around in November going like, oh my God, now nobody's wanting to book. Right. So you're going to kind of like get ahead of that. But the other thing that I like to check is AirDNA, and it might not be legal in your area to do short-term rental, but I like to see, okay, Furnish Finder pricing is my low end, AirDNA is what I'm shooting for, because you can make the same amount with a short-term rental as a midterm rental. Sorry, the other way around. You can make as much with a midterm rental as a short-term rental. And so it's just a matter of knowing how you can push it and then testing it. So generally, every time we have a tenant turnover, we might be pushing our pricing 100, 200, just seeing if people bite. If people are not biting, okay, maybe we'll reel it back. But you can generally incrementally add to that.
Okay. And one last question. Sorry.
Sure.
What's the sweet spot that is good for travel nurses in terms of like the location, housing, and how far away the hospitals are? Is it like a 5 or 6 mile range, or
Yeah.
what's the ideal sweet spot here?
Yeah, usually it's 5 miles or less. And if you're if you already live in your house, it's like, okay, just try to make that work. But if you're going out to buy new properties, I usually say try to be within 5 miles of 2 hospitals, because sometimes there's these kind of complexes where you might have 5 hospitals in the same area, and those are gold. So generally people do not want to drive more than 20 minutes, and that's kind of where that 5 miles is. But if you're in a more rural market, people will generally drive up to 30 minutes. Yeah.
Zeona, you kind of talked a little bit about AirDNA. Are they developing anything for midterm rentals where like we can analyze it a little bit more? Because like the homes here in Southern California, I would love to own one. There's hospitals everywhere you look, right? Where I live in the Inland Empire, and Dr. Cheng knows the area. There's hospitals everywhere, right? But the thing is, for us to drop $600,000-$700,000 on a home, it's hard for me because there's really no data out there. You almost have to trust it and feel it out, So have you heard of any software out there that's being developed, or do we just look on Zillow or just take everything into account?
Yeah, so Furnish Finder has furnishfinder.com/stats, and that's a little bit of
Mm.
data. So they're telling you how many people are doing housing requests in the area, and they're building that out. They're going to be giving more and more data as they can. AirDNA is not, as I know of now, I imagine they're planning to do something. Mashvisor is doing monthly pricing. They're starting to offer kind of like quotes of what you would see, and I think they're pulling it from Furnish Finder. So it may not be that much more robust than what you can do on your own of just running comps on Furnish Finder. And then I know Price
Mhm.
Labs is rolling out monthly pricing. They're going to start doing that too. So
Oh,
there are
that's
things
new.
that are coming, but I think the
Yeah.
best way to know a market is to talk to other investors that are doing what you want to do already, right?
Right.
It's like find somebody who's already doing it, listen to their numbers, see what's possible. Yeah.
Right. Cool.
And actually,
The-
he had asked about stipends and we didn't talk about that. You can look up
Yeah.
stipends in an area on Indeed. So Indeed.com is where like a lot of jobs are posted, and you can look up travel RNs. And there's ways in there that you can look by area for what the average stipend is. You can also see how many jobs are posted in your area. It's incredible. Some places it's like 500 jobs and you're just like, whoa, still a huge demand for travel nurses.
I think even military, right? Military is like public information. So you could go out there and figure that out if you're in a military town and want to do medium-term rentals too.
Yeah, and there's government contracts, there's film industry, there's lots of people that need furnished housing for months at a time. It's sort of just this underground thing that people hadn't talked about much before.
Right. Dr. Chang, come on in here. You got a question?
Love it. He's like
Are you on
literally
mute?
at work.
He's got to be.
Yeah, you're on
muted down.
mute.
I think you're on mute, or we can't hear you. Why don't we go to Anna? Anna, why don't you come on in here while Dr. Chang figures out his mic or something like that?
Yeah, type out your question. That's a good idea.
Right.
Hi, thank you so much for
Hi.
having me. Such a great conversation and definitely learning a lot. Zeona, a few questions for you. The first one is, where do you actually get most of your midterm tenants? Is it really through Furnished Finder, or do you try to focus on alternate sources?
Yeah, so primarily it's been Furnish Finder and Airbnb to start. And now I'm kind of moving my inventory into something that will work more for insurance stays, because that's where I really see the upside potential.
Yeah.
And the problem for me was that a lot of my properties were just 1 and 2 bedrooms. And so it felt like more of a nurse stay than an insurance stay. So I've just launched a home that's a 4-bedroom, 4-bath, and I'm kind of moving towards that direction. The thing about that is that there are so many websites for relocation and for insurance. It's just not the same. They're not really looking at Airbnb, because on Airbnb, they have such high fees that it kind of messes it up for them. They end up paying those fees. And so what they're trying to do is do direct bookings through these other channels. And so literally we're probably on close to 20 websites. Like that's where we're kind of going.
Wow.
So there's a little bit more effort and work, but what's cool about it is like one of the websites is corporate housing by owner. And I was on there today, and some of the markets, there's like 1 or 2 other houses. Like that's it. So it feels very exciting to be in a space like that, rather than Airbnb where you're like, oh, I'm on page 15, I'm screwed, right? So I like that idea of building out that space. And it's important to be on these websites at the beginning. But what happens is you get to know the relocation specialist in that area. They work in regions generally. And once they've had a good experience with you, they're going to keep calling you. They don't want to be browsing websites. They want to work with their people. And so that's what it is. It's building these relationships and then staying in touch with these people.
Gotcha. But like a friend of mine, she had a midterm in San Francisco area, and she was trying to get outside of Furnished Finder, and was not very successful. She basically said that she tried calling a few insurance companies. She ended up being on some databases and some lists, but there was really no output from that. She felt kind of like nameless, so to speak. So yeah, I was just trying to see if there's some methodology or some some way that you could do this successfully, especially like if you're looking, like you mentioned, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom homes, because it would not work for nurses unless you do like, rent by room or something, right?
Yeah, so the way that I kind of mitigate that is that I end up buying in places where I can legally short term, even though short term is not my plan, right? And the reason I want to do that is because I can primarily try to get midterm stays, but if I have some gaps, it's not as important because I can fill those gaps with a couple 2 nights here and there. It is really about building that network. So there are 2 main teachers in this space. Jesse Vasquez, he does a lot of cold calls, and Rachel Gainsborough, which is who Alex mentioned earlier that had been here. She doesn't cold call at all. She's like, I don't want to pick up the phone like that. So she is listed on the websites. Then once she builds the relationship, she stays in touch with them, and it's through like a monthly email. So you don't have to do that. You don't have to do all that legwork, but you can. But for an example, I have a friend in Memphis, and he's in the boonies. He's not in Memphis proper. He's out in the sticks. He's got 11 properties, and they're all full, and it's only insurance. He does not even rent to nurses. And it's because he's become this Memphis guy. And whenever somebody has a place in Memphis, they call him, right? And so he's been building that network. And I think he was telling me they made like 30,000 in profit just this last month, and they're just like killing it. He's like, I think we could go to 100 grand a month in profit. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential, and it's just, I think when you have one property, people don't take you as seriously. And some of the ways that people have gotten over that is that they kind of group in a few of their friends, and they say, I'm going to have my direct booking website, and I'm going to list you guys on here. And so obviously I'm going to push my property first, but if I can't fill their need, I want to be able to say yes. And so people either go out and they get an arbitrage place and they just say yes, or they, market it out to their friends. But if you have 5 or more properties, you're going to be seen as something more official than just one property.
Makes sense. And do you like with the 4-bedroom that you just acquired, have you started, building those connections, I guess while you were looking for it or under a contract, just to, kind of get established? Because it seems like it's, once you acquire and you need to do something with it, it seems like in your case, if you don't have someone staying there or, plan like a corporate stay in this 4-bedroom, then the only way out for you would be to do STR until you find, a midterm clients. So do you have to like start like several months prior to like, letting everyone know that potentially you have something in the city or in this, area or whatnot?
You could, but what I have basically seen is people want something pretty quickly. Like the turnaround is usually like 2 weeks. So I don't know if it would be that advantageous, but you could. I think it's easier once you already have a property and have a relationship, and then go, I can go get another property because this contract's coming up, right? Okay. But for us, we just launched last month, and we've been full with short-term rental for now, but I don't love that because short-term rental is like 10 people in my house. And what I want is like 2 people that are displaced, but they're happy to pay more. And with the short-term rental, we've been getting, maybe we're around like 5 grand a month. Like it's slower season right now, but the upside for this size of house in that market and insurance is like 9 grand a month. So like I'm moving towards that. Like that's what I'm shooting for. And it's just a matter of like, we're just getting going on all the websites. And like, I have been getting a couple requests, but just making sure that they work out. So it is a little bit of effort, but I definitely think that it's possible for everybody. Like, I don't think this is a unicorn kind of thing.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
It's funny because you dropped a lot of like Jesse and Rachel, really weird guys. Like the real estate world is really small, and it's like everyone knows it. Really, like we've had Rachel and Jesse on. And one of the things Rachel did is what she found is she didn't have enough homes. Like she felt like she had to buy more homes because she didn't like turning these down. And then what happened is she built her network out and helped her friend. She's like, well, I don't have one, but my friend over here has a home probably available. So that's been pretty cool. Let me ask you, And you mentioned Jesse too, because are you going to be at his meetup or his summit in San Diego?
Yeah, I will be.
Right. You have any more information on that, or I don't know too much about it?
Yeah,
The
so it's in
dates or
San
anything like that?
Diego. It is the end of April, but it is already sold out. So I think he's going to do similar to Tony and Sarah, where they kind of do them periodically, so maybe quarterly or something like that. So this is the
Right.
first one. He's sort of testing the waters, but yeah, seems like there's a lot of interest.
That's exciting. I think where you Jesse, Dr. Rachel, you guys are like kind of in the forefront of this. Like I said, I think it's still the emerging thing. And I think a lot of short-term rental operators, because we can't find any short-term rentals that are profitable right now or are worth it. So like a lot of people are looking at midterm rental. Here's a question I get all the time. With short-term rentals, because there's a housing crisis, do you think the emergence of short-term rentals and midterm rentals are like exasperating the housing crisis? Kind of a philosophical question there.
That's interesting. When they blamed short-term rentals for the housing crisis at the beginning, I didn't think that that was really valid because short-term rentals actually create more housing, right? So if you're in a market where somebody has to live in their home 6 months of the year, like that's my market's rule. A lot of markets have this owner-occupied rule. Then before, people were not renting out their house 6 months a year. Now they are, right? Because they can do that on Airbnb. And so it's creating more housing by offering more spare rooms and basements. People sleep on their couch. Some people rent an RV in their driveway. I mean, like this was housing that didn't exist before. So I think that's not really valid. Midterm rental on the other side, that has taken away a house, right? Like, I don't know. You may be bringing a couple more bedrooms to the market that weren't existing before, but in general, that is a space that could have been a long-term rental, but I don't know. I don't know if that's actually, the full cause.
Right. We got Dr. Chang's question in here. He asked, how do you market yourself to insurance companies to stand out more than your competition? What do they look for?
Yeah, so I think what's important is to have a larger home, like I said. And so if you go do this now, go to corporate housing by owner and search in your town. You'd be surprised that if you put 4 or 5 bedrooms, all of a sudden there's almost no inventory. And so you can stand out by being just one of the few that are there. So I think that's great. Dr. Rachel, she generally says 5 bedrooms plus. That's what she does. But I've heard Jesse goes with 3 bedrooms or more. So it just kind of depends on what your strategy is going to be. But it's having nice furniture and good photos. I know it sounds simplistic, but honestly, if you spend a little time on Furnish Finder, you'd be very surprised that there's a lot of very minimalist, dark basements, like just kind of nasty places still.
Cell phone photos, like
really,
right.
It hasn't fully broken in yet. So there is the ability to stand out pretty easily. And I think it's just a matter of getting on the website. So if people want to reach out to me, I'll put my Instagram handle in here, but I'm happy to give you the websites that I'm listing on. It's just kind of too many to talk about, but feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Right. And Zeona's not a CPA here, but I don't know if you can touch on this, but Dr. Chang's also talking about, are there any tax strategies you can take advantage of with midterm rentals?
So I am not an expert at that part. And Amanda Hahn, who is your CPA, she's all over Bigger Pockets and wrote a book for them. So I would recommend reaching out to her because she can talk to this more, but you can do cost segregation, as that's like the big gem of short-term rentals, is that cost segregation allows you to have a huge write-off. Like you're essentially speeding up the depreciation and kind of taking it at the forefront rather than waiting 27 years. But you can't qualify it the same way. So the cool thing about a short-term rental is that that's more of an active business. And so you qualify for it even if you're not a real estate professional. I think with a midterm rental, you still have to qualify to be a real estate professional, which means you have to do 750 hours between you and your spouse in a year that is real estate related. And that could be analyzing deals. It can be, coordinating cleaners and furnishing a place. Like, you can get those hours, but if you're doing it really, really part-time with someone managing, it might be hard to do. So Yeah, but reach out to Amanda Hahn because she'll have some
Right.
good ideas.
She was actually on, we had her on a few months ago. I'm gonna try to have her on
Yeah.
again as like a yearly thing. There's
Yeah.
another thing here. Do you see a trend of nurses traveling by themselves or in groups? And actually, Jonas is here. He's actually a travel physical therapist. So it's not just travel nurses,
Oh,
which when
totally.
he told me he's a travel physical therapist, I was like, oh, I didn't even know that's a thing. And I think they travel together, right?
You can. So I haven't seen this yet, but it's because I probably didn't have big enough homes for it. But Jesse talks about this where four nurses will get together, especially like younger ones. And so they'll take like an assignment and then they'll go, travel Europe or go do some fun trip and then go take another assignment, and they like to travel together. And so they might rent a 4-bedroom house. But in general, what I
Right.
see in the 1 to 2 bedroom houses is like, oh, it's someone and their kid or someone and their spouse, right? That their spouse maybe works from home, something like that. So that's generally what I've seen.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Ziona. So 30-day stay with bigger pockets. How did the book come about?
Yeah. So this is kind of funny,
That
but
must be cool, right? Like someone
um,
comes up to you with bigger
it's
pockets, such a
surreal.
big name, like, oh my gosh, you want me to write this book? I jump all over that, right?
Yeah. So I did my first interview with Bigger Pockets in 2017, and around maybe 2018 or something, they asked me to do a short-term rental book, and I kind of fumbled it. I didn't take it super
Mm,
serious. I don't know, I let the opportunity sort of slide, and that went away. And then a year later, I saw Avery Carl got that opportunity to write their short-term rental book. But by that time, I felt kind of burnt out on short-term rentals. And I was
mm,
like, I feel stupid. I feel like I missed out on this crazy opportunity, but I'm sort of over it. So I don't know if I would have been
right,
the best person to write that book. And
right.
then I got into midterm rentals. And so I was like at the Bigger Pockets conference, looking at all their books and going like, what have they not written? It's all done. It's been
Mhm.
done. And
Right,
then
right,
I thought, man, midterm rental, I wonder if that's even a thing. Is it too niche? Like, does anybody care about this? And I pitched
right.
them right there. And then they asked for a
Uh,
proposal and we did it. We did it 2 weeks later
Wow.
and they like sped it through. And now it's a big deal. But back
Right,
then it was
right.
a real long shot. Yeah.
That's
So
phenomenal. Yeah.
it's pretty
Like I
fun.
actually,
Uh,
like I actually co-authored a book, Hospitable Host, and just to even have a
Oh,
chapter.
nice.
And I'm not
Yeah.
like, I mean, I graduated college 20 years ago, and like medical professionals were used to talking in fragments. So I haven't like written out a sentence in years, right? And so for me to come up with
Yeah.
like a chapter was like actually really difficult for me. Um,
Yeah.
cool. Ziona, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. I have a website, zeonamcintyre.com, and also Instagram's an easy way at Zeona McIntyre. So yeah, reach out. If you guys have
Okay.
questions, I'm happy to, answer those and help out, point you to right resources and everything.
And if people are looking to get into midterm rentals and want to like reach out to you or even want more like guidance, like you're offering courses, right? Or is that right?
Yeah,
Or
so we have an 8-week live course that's starting March 6th, and that course, we're closing it on Friday. So we're kind of keeping it as a
Mm,
small group. I think it'll be around 30. Um, and so if you're interested in that, there's more info on my website. Otherwise, I do one-on-one consulting with people and I help people invest out of state. So a lot of times I'm sending people to the Midwest. There's a lot of opportunity there for midterm for smaller units. If you're going to do multifamily and stuff like that, it's just cheaper. So it's a lot easier for people to get started.
all right, cool. Want to be respectful of your time here. We're coming up on the hour. I'm gonna go over to Facebook real quick, just to make sure I don't like multitask well, just to let you guys know. So one question is, how do you research the demand for midterm rental in your area? I guess that's a really good question here.
Yeah, and it's not super easy to tell. Like I said, furnishfinder.com/stats, it shows in there how many housing requests are in each area. And I've heard recently that people said, oh, if it's over 50,000 requests, like that's a pretty steady, good demand. But it's hard to really understand that and hard to really tell. So again, I always say network with people. So if it's an online group, if it's a group like this, share about where you're investing and find other people that are already doing it there. I host a meetup and I have people come in person, but I also have a Facebook group where it's people all over the US. And I think that's just the best way is getting an idea from somebody who's doing it.
Right. Well, Zeona, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. My camera died, so that's why you're not seeing my my face right now. Technical
You're all good.
difficulties. So,
Yeah.
but with that, yeah, we'll go ahead and end this meeting. Thank you so much, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.